If you ever sit down and watch like a truly masterful stage magician, you start to notice that the entire trick relies on this very specific kind of misdirection.
Oh, yeah, completely. It's all about where you're looking.
Right. They get you to look at their right hand, flourishing a cape or waving a wand, creating this massive visual spectacle.
Yeah.
And because your eyes are just locked onto that right hand, you completely miss what the left hand is doing, which is, it's quietly palming the coin or hiding the card. The trick only works because you're focused exclusively on what is immediately visible right in front of you.
That is honestly the perfect analogy for what we're getting into today, because we are so easily captivated by the immediate visible effects of an action that we just completely ignore the mechanics happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And that brings us to our mission for this deep dive. Today, we're exploring Henry Hazlitt's classic 1946 book, Economics in One Lesson.
Along with that 2007 introduction by Walter Block, yeah.
Right, the Walter Block intro. And our goal for you, listening right now, is to arm you with a single, highly effective mental model. We want to give you a shortcut, basically, to cut through the daily noise of, political promises, complex policies, and those blaring news headlines that just cause massive information overload.
Yeah, we want to give you the tool to always spot the magician's left hand.
Okay, let's unpack this. The foundational premise of this entire source text, the one lesson, is actually remarkably straightforward. Hazlitt argues that the art of economics consists of looking not merely at the immediate short-term effects of any act or policy on a single group, but at the long-term effects on all groups.
Right, and it really is the ultimate test of good versus bad economics, according to the source material. Bad economics, it basically stems from observing only what is immediately visible to the eye.
Which is usually just a short-term benefit to a really specific special interest group, right?
Exactly. Good economics, on the other hand, demands that we look further. It requires us to seek out the secondary consequences, like we have to look for the unseen.
The unseen, yeah.
And it is fascinating how often this lesson is just ignored, even by brilliant policymakers. Because, following that chain of secondary consequences, it requires a lot of disciplined thought.
It really does. And to actually put this mental model to work, we need a concrete example. And the text provides a fantastic one. It borrows a really famous illustration from the French economist Frédéric Bastiat.
Yes, the broken window fallacy.
The broken window fallacy. So the scenario goes like this. A young hoodlum throws a heavy brick through the plate glass window of a local baker's shop. The baker runs out, he's furious, but the kid is already gone.
Naturally.
Right. So a crowd gathers around the shattered glass, and eventually someone in that crowd points out a silver lining. They say, well, it's a terrible shame for the baker, but hey, it means $50 of new business for the local glazier.
Always a silver lining for someone.
Right. And they say, if windows were never broken, what would happen to the glass business? And slowly, the crowd actually convinces itself that the hoodlum is like a public benefactor because his act of destruction just stimulated the local economy.
What's fascinating here is how perfectly this captures that optical illusion we just talked about. The crowd sees the baker and they see the glazier.
They literally watch the $50 change hands.
Yeah, they see the money and the brand new window being installed. It's highly, highly visible, but they are completely blind to a crucial third party, which is the tailor.
The unseen tailor.
The unseen tailor, exactly. The text points out that the baker was actually planning to spend that exact $50 on a new suit that very afternoon.
Oh, man.
Right. So because he had to replace his window, he now has to go without the suit. The glazier's gain of business is exactly the tailor's loss of business. No new employment was actually added to the economy.
Wealth was just diverted from one place to another.
Precise.
It's like celebrating a massive multi-car pileup on the highway because it guarantees an incredibly profitable year for the local auto mechanics.
Yeah, or the tow truck drivers.
Right. It feels so obvious when we talk about a single window or a car crash. But let me push back on this, because when we scale this up, people's intuition completely flips.
How so?
What about war? If you look at history, people constantly point to the post-World War II factory rebuilding in Europe and Japan as proof that massive destruction actually creates huge economic booms. Doesn't war create a massive backed-up demand that drives prosperity?
Well, the source material takes that exact argument head-on, actually. It calls it the broken window fallacy, grown fat beyond recognition.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, the crucial distinction the text makes is that need is not the same thing as effective economic demand. Yes, obviously a bombed-out city has an enormous need for housing and infrastructure.
Oh.
but effective demand requires actual purchasing power.
Wait, let me make sure I have this straight. People see a post-war boom and think wealth is being created, but you're saying the book calls it an illusion.
It is an illusion, and it's one that's often fueled by wartime monetary inflation,
Ah.
right? Because to fund a war, governments print a lot of money.
Mm.
That inflation makes it look like there's this huge surge in purchasing power because there's just more currency floating around.
But the actual value of that money is diluted.
Exactly. In terms of real, tangible wealth, plowing resources into replacing factories and homes that were destroyed, it just gets a society back to baseline. You end up with exactly what you had before the bombs fell.
Right, you're just back to zero.
And it comes at the staggering cost of all the completely new things society could have built if they weren't forced to just, replace the old things. Destruction diverts demand. It never magically increases total wealth.
Okay, so if literal destruction doesn't make us richer, what about intentional creation? Let's talk about government projects. Things like bridges, dams, railways, built specifically to create jobs.
Okay.
Say the government decides to build a $1 million bridge, and the primary stated goal is to, quote, provide employment. It seems to work. I mean, you and I can drive by and physically see 500 workers in hard hats getting paychecks, building a bridge.
We can see them, yes. That's the visible part. But here again, we have to apply our lesson. We have to look for the unseen. How is that $1 million bridge actually paid for?
Taxes, mostly.
Right. The text operates on the premise that ultimately every dollar of government spending must be raised through a dollar of taxation. So $1 million is taken away from taxpayers across the country.
Which means that $1 million is money those taxpayers would have spent on the things they personally needed most.
That is the unseen cost. The text actually uses the Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, and the massive Norris Dam as an example.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it points out how incredibly easy it is to photograph a giant, majestic dam and say, look at this incredible wealth we created. But what the camera cannot capture are the private power plants, the private homes, or the consumer goods that were never allowed to come into existence.
Because the capital to build them was taxed away.
Exactly. It was taxed away from citizens across the entire country to build that one specific dam. So for every highly visible public job created on the bridge or the dam, an unseen private job is destroyed somewhere else.
I see where you're going with that, but let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure.
What if we aren't talking about taxing people to build a bridge? What if the government is just stepping in to lend a hand? Say, a government agency gives a loan for a tractor to Farmer B. Now, Farmer B is a poor credit risk, he has a bad track record, and a local private bank absolutely refuses to lend to him.
Okay.
If you're listening to this and you've ever struggled to get a loan, you might think, isn't the government doing a good thing by helping someone get on their feet who otherwise wouldn't have a chance?
Well, the source provides a very clear, albeit kind of cold, analysis of this exact scenario. What we have to realize is that the government isn't just lending money. Money is just the medium of exchange.
Right.
The government is lending real capital. It is lending an actual physical tractor. And the number of tractors in existence at any given moment is limited.
Ah, okay, I see. If you give that specific physical tractor to Farmer B, you literally cannot give it to anyone else.
Correct. And who is the anyone else? It's Farmer A.
The unseen farmer.
Right. Farmer A is the efficient, trustworthy producer who actually does have credit with the private bank because of his proven track record. By giving the limited real capital to the less efficient borrower, Farmer B, the government actively denies it to the more efficient producer.
Wow.
And the inevitable result, according to the text, is that the overall production of the entire community goes down. The government essentially wastes capital by putting it into the hands of less competent producers.
So we see Farmer B sitting on the shiny new tractor, but we are completely blind to Farmer A staring at an empty field. It's the magician's trick all over again. But, this brings up a really visceral fear for a lot of people.
Yeah.
If we shouldn't waste resources on inefficient producers just to keep them employed, doesn't that mean we want maximum efficiency?
Yes, generally.
And if we get too efficient, especially with, technology, won't machines just permanently destroy everyone's jobs?
Ah, the curse of machinery. It is a fear that has persisted for centuries, honestly.
Really?
Yeah. The text highlights some brilliant historical examples to show how long we've misunderstood this. For instance, it cites Adam Smith noting back in 1776 that a workman could maybe make 1 pin a day by hand.
1 pin a day.
Yeah. But with new machinery, a small team could make 4,800 pins a day per person.
That's a massive jump.
Huge. And by the logic of the machine fears, that leap in efficiency should have caused massive permanent unemployment in the pin industry. The text also quotes Eleanor Roosevelt writing in 1945, saying, "We have reached a point today where labor-saving devices are good only when they do not throw the worker out of his job."
But look, if I'm a factory worker and a new robotic arm is installed that does my job twice as fast, I am out on the street. It is incredibly hard to see how that is like a net positive for me or for society. How does the book justify that human cost?
Well, the text is actually very careful to note that we shouldn't ignore the plight of that specific displaced worker. An artisan whose specialized skill is suddenly rendered obsolete by a machine, they face a real personal tragedy.
Yeah, it's devastating.
It is. But the economic argument is that the solution isn't to hold back the progress of civilization and artificially lower the standard of living for everyone just to freeze that one specific job in amber.
Right.
Because if labor-saving devices were inherently bad just because they eliminated specific jobs, we would basically have to view all human progress as a tragic mistake.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The text offers this incredibly sharp analogy. It says, if efficiency is so terrible and creating backbreaking work is so great, why on earth do we use railroads to move freight from New York to Chicago? We could just employ millions of men to carry it all on their backs.
Exactly. It perfectly highlights the confusion between means and ends. The text stresses that the economic goal of any nation is full production, not merely full employment.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. You can have 100% full employment in a prison chain gang or under slavery. But the whole purpose of human effort is to get the greatest possible result with the least possible effort.
So what is the actual mechanism then? If the machine displaces the pin maker, how does the economy recover that job?
It comes down to lower prices and freed up purchasing power. Let's say a clothing manufacturer installs a new machine that cuts the labor needed to make an overcoat in half.
Okay.
One of two things happens. Either the owner keeps the price the same and makes a larger profit, which he then spends on expanding his factory or buying consumer goods, creating new jobs in those areas.
Right.
Or, and this is more likely, competition forces him to lower the price of the overcoat.
Which means the consumer who buys that coat now pays, say, $30 instead of $50. That consumer suddenly has $20 left over in their pocket that they didn't have before.
Precisely.
And they go out and spend that $20 on a toaster or taking their family out to dinner, which directly creates new jobs in the appliance and restaurant industries.
Right. The machine doesn't destroy purchasing power. It just relocates it. And this is why make-work schemes are so damaging. The text talks about unions demanding that painters use small brushes instead of efficient spray guns, or railroads being forced to employ firemen on modern diesel locomotives that don't even have fires to tend.
That's crazy.
It's all based on this fetish of full employment, and it actively restricts the wealth of society.
Okay, so if the goal is maximum production and we want all these efficient machines running, how does society actually know what to produce? I mean, there is no giant control room with a central planner dictating how many overcoats or toasters we need this month.
No, there isn't. And the text uses the classic analogy of Robinson Crusoe alone on his island to explain this.
Oh yeah, the Crusoe analogy.
Right. Crusoe has to constantly allocate his limited time. He's thirsty, so he starts building a rain barrel. But then his hunger becomes more urgent, so he has to stop the barrel and go fish. He is constantly shifting his energy to his most urgent needs.
So how does that map to us?
Well, in a complex modern society with millions of people, that mind-boggling equation of allocating resources is solved quasi-automatically by the price system.
It's like the governor on a steam engine. When people want more of a product, they buy more of it, which bids the price up.
Exactly.
And that higher price means higher profits for the makers of that product. Those high profits act as a massive neon sign to the rest of the economy saying, hey, everyone, making this thing is highly profitable. Make more of it.
Right, so capital and labor rush into that industry.
Right, and the supply goes up, which eventually forces the price back down, and profits normalize.
Which leads to a crucial debate in the text regarding trade and tariffs. Because if prices and competition are the most efficient way to allocate our resources, what happens when the government steps in to protect a domestic industry from cheaper foreign competition?
Oh, this is a debate we hear in the news constantly. Let's say there's an American sweater manufacturer. To pay his workers and stay in business, he needs to charge $15 for a sweater.
Yeah.
But British manufacturers can make the exact same quality sweater and sell it in America for $10. The American manufacturer goes to Congress and says, you need to put a $5 tariff on British sweaters or I'll go bankrupt and thousands of American workers will lose their jobs. Shouldn't we protect those visible domestic jobs?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture and force ourselves to look at the secondary consequences, we see that the $5 tariff acts as a hidden tax on the American consumer. Think about the last time you bought a sweater. Because of the tariff, you save the 20,000 visible jobs in the American sweater industry. But the American consumer now has to pay $15 for a sweater instead of $10.
So they lose $5.
Exactly. That consumer has $5 less to spend in other American industries. So to save 20,000 visible jobs in an inefficient industry, you quietly destroy 20,000 unseen jobs in 100 other industries.
And it's actually worse than a one-to-one swap, isn't it?
Wow.
By protecting the sweater maker, we are artificially trapping our own capital and labor in an industry where we are fundamentally inefficient.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of letting those resources move to industries where we are highly efficient, like making cars or technology, which we could then export to the world, we are legally forcing our country to do what it's bad at.
It is entirely counterproductive.
Yeah.
The text takes this a step further and points out the absurdity of trying to freeze historical price relationships to protect an industry. It discusses the historical demand for parity prices in agriculture.
Oh, the parity prices, yeah.
Right. The agricultural lobby wanted the government to artificially force the price of farm goods to have the exact same purchasing power they enjoyed during this brief golden age between 1909 and 1914.
The math on that example from the text is absolutely wild. Hazlitt applies that same parity logic to cars to show how crazy it is.
A great example.
Right, so a 1912 Chevrolet cost $2,150. If you adjusted for parity in 1942, while completely ignoring all the incredible assembly line improvements that Henry Ford and others introduced, a 1942 Chevy should have cost $3,270.
Which is ridiculous.
It completely ignores the fact that modern tractors allow farmers to produce vastly more crop per acre with a fraction of the labor. Freezing prices ignores innovation.
And to enforce those artificially high farm prices, governments usually have to restrict production. They literally pay farmers not to grow food, or they order crops to be destroyed.
They just throw it away.
Yeah, they create artificial scarcity to prop up a specific price for a specific special interest group.
That covers keeping foreign competition out or protecting farmers. But what happens when we try to force the math to work in our favor for everyday workers? What about when the government tries to fix minimum wages or maximum prices right here at home? Let's take the minimum wage first, because this is intensely debated today.
Oh, absolutely.
The text has a very uncompromising stance here. It states that you cannot make a man worth a given amount by making it illegal for anyone to offer him anything less.
The logic presented is that wages are simply a price, the price of labor. If the government mandates a $30 weekly minimum wage, you do not magically increase the economic value of a worker whose current skills are only worth $20 to an employer.
Right.
You simply outlaw that worker from finding employment. You substitute a low wage with total unemployment.
The classic counterargument, usually from unions, is that we need to force wages up so workers have enough purchasing power to buy back the product they create. The theory is, if we mandate a 30% wage increase across the board, people will have way more money to buy stuff and the whole economy will boom.
The text labels this the buy back the product fallacy. It ignores a fundamental truth of economics, which is that everyone's income is someone else's cost.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. To understand this, let's put you, the listener, in the shoes of a small business owner. Imagine you run a local bakery. If a mandate forces your payroll up by 30% overnight, but your bakers aren't magically producing 30% more bread, your production costs have just spiked drastically.
Right, if my costs go up 30%, I have to find that money somewhere.
You have to raise the price of your bread. Now let's talk about the marginal producer. The marginal producer is the bakery owner who was already just barely scraping by breaking even before the wage hike.
Okay.
When their costs jump 30%, they can't afford to absorb it. And if they raise their prices, they lose all their customers to larger competitors. So the marginal producer simply goes out of business.
Wow.
This creates massive transitional unemployment bakers who suddenly have no jobs at all.
And for the workers who did keep their jobs and got the 30% raise, they now go to the store and find that the price of bread and clothes and everything else has also gone up 30%.
Exactly.
Their real purchasing power hasn't changed at all. They just have a bigger number on their paycheck that buys the exact same amount of stuff.
What about corporate profits, though? People often assume profits are this massive, endless pot of gold that can easily absorb all these wage hikes without raising prices. The text completely debunks that myth. It points out that from 1929 to 1943, corporate net income averaged under 5% of the national income.
Under 5%.
Yeah, profits are not a massive slush fund. As we discussed with the steam engine analogy, profits are the essential signaling mechanism of a free economy.
So what does this all mean? If profits signal where we need more supply, what happens when the government puts a ceiling on prices? Like saying milk and meat are essential, so it is illegal to charge more than $3 for them. We do it to protect poor consumers, which sounds incredibly noble.
It sounds noble, sure, but it short-circuits the entire signaling system. The text mentions the Office of Price Administration during the war. Slaughterhouses were forced to sell meat for less than it cost them to buy the cattle and process it.
That's a recipe for disaster.
It is. When you fix the price of a necessity below its natural market level, two things happen simultaneously. First, you increase the demand because it is artificially cheap. Second, you destroy the supply because it is no longer profitable to produce.
Right, the ranchers just stop.
Exactly. The marginal producers, the ranchers barely breaking even, stop raising cattle.
So by trying to make a necessity affordable, the government accidentally creates a massive shortage of the exact thing they wanted everyone to have.
Yes.
And then what? The government has to start rationing the meat and controlling the price of the cattle feed and the wages of the farmhands, and suddenly you are on the road to a completely regimented, totalitarian economy, all because we tried to enforce one seemingly kind-hearted price ceiling.
It's a domino effect.
It feels like every time we try to artificially fix one thing, 3 other things break, because nobody looked at the unseen consequences.
That is the enduring power of the central lesson in this text. And it brings us to a final, very provocative concept that Hazlitt explores. He argues that each of us suffers from a sort of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, multiple economic personality.
Wait, how are we Jekyll and Hyde?
Well, as producers, in our day jobs, we're all secretly Mr. Hyde. We want inflation, we want tariffs against our competitors, we want government subsidies, and we want a legally mandated high price for the specific product or service we personally provide.
That's so true.
But as consumers, when we go to the grocery store, we are Dr. Jekyll. We demand strict price ceilings, free trade, and ruthlessly cheap goods from absolutely everyone else.
We want a total monopoly for what we sell, but cutthroat competition for everything we buy.
Precisely. And this raises a vital question for you, the listener, to mull over long after this deep dive ends. What if our individual, selfish attempts at the ballot box voting, to rig the economic system to protect our own specific jobs or our own industries, are precisely the mechanisms that are shrinking the overall economic pie that we all have to consume?
Wow.
If everyone successfully votes to subsidize their own industry at the direct expense of everyone else, doesn't society ultimately end up poorer?
That is a deeply uncomfortable but fascinating thought to leave on. If we are all palming the coin, there's no money left in the audience's pockets. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We crafted this exploration of Hazlitt's text specifically to help you spot those unseen consequences hiding behind tomorrow's headlines.
It's all about looking for the left hand.
Exactly. The next time you see a politician waving their right hand, promising a new subsidy, a new tariff, or a new price control, remember to look closely at what the left hand is doing. Keep questioning the obvious, and we'll see you next time.